his own Scarf Landorus. So for me, the big question here is, how is James going to get around the fact that his Pokemon are so much slower? As we jump into game one, I almost said James 1.
Yeah, we have game 1 loading up. James Evans with the Iron Hands Arcanine lead versus Jacob's Landorus variant and the Iron Hands. So Iron Hands leading, and both of them, all the Pokemon affected by Intimidate, going to get down to 1 stage of lowered attack right here. So what would you say, Wolf, of how this is going to end up? Do you see switches? And it looks like we very much are.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because, like, the thing is that you've let 2 Pokemon who are weak to Landorus into Landorus. A big interaction here is what is the speed order of the Iron Hands? Who's faster? Who's slower? Etc. Etc. So it looks like James is considering switching out his Arcanine here. I agree. Like, after being intimidated, like, Arcanine is not super bulky. So you want to get it out off the field immediately against these 2 powerful, super effective attackers, get intimidated down later. Cresselia switching in here I think makes some sense. This Cresselia is James' main form of speed control. And actually, interestingly enough, looks like Jacob's Iron Hands is faster. So that could have backfired a little if it had been like Fake Out plus Stomping Tantrum into the Iron Hands. But yeah, we see James looks happy with the turn, actually kind of dancing a little in the camera there. As yeah, he has to watch out now for the double power Stomping Tantrum. That is really dangerous. But one of the things that's nice is that because Jacob's Landorus actually flinched there, he can go for a U-turn here. He doesn't have to lock into Stomping Tantrum.
Yeah, what's nice for James is he actually has 2 ground immunities with the Levitating Cresselia and the Landorus variant that can switch in, so not really worried about that Stomping Tantrum. Jacob does have that option if he doesn't think that James is going to switch out, but can just go for a U-turn, as you said, and get some positioning. Iron Hands is kind of an interesting spot. Psychic and Ice Beam threaten both of these Pokemon, so let's see how Jacob's going to play around the Cresselia, where it's actually threatening quite a bit of offense right here on the board, but Landorus is going to come in and intimidate this, so that is going to be -2 Iron Hands and Landorus, but we do see the U-turn come out from the Landorus into Cresselia. We'll see what comes in.
Absolutely. I think that's a great U-turn personally. Like, you already had an Intimidate on your Landorus and a Stomping Tantrum, although it can be good in the short term, like, is kind of risky in the long term, in my opinion, to get locked into it, as Ogerpon is actually the switch here. That's very, very dangerous. And this might not look that assuming if you're just like glancing at the board, but the fact that Ogerpon came in without being intimidated, and also like is in a position where Jacob has his Landorus still in the back, so we can switch it in and protect the Ogerpon from potentially a Terra Blast or a Stomping Tantrum. I think this is a really dangerous position personally, and I think that yeah, like if I'm James here, I'm definitely a little bit worried, as there is a chance here that James wants to call the Landorus switching in, which is a risky play. I mean, it could backfire here, and you can see James kind of considering it. But I mean, hitting the Landorus with an Ice Beam would be massive.
Yeah, the Iron Hands is just super threatened on Jacob's side, so looks like we are going to see a switch. So let's see if James Evans is trying to keep up the momentum.
Oh my goodness. Excellent switch, or excellent prediction here from James, but I'm not so familiar with Ogerpon. Do you think it lives a Terrafire or Ivy Cudgel? Oh, important thing that I forgot about momentarily. Here's the Terrafire is James actually has double Intimidate, so that having Landorus on the field isn't such a big deal because he can, at any point, just bring an Arcanine, especially with this U-turn. So this is still a really powerful Pokemon, though. I mean, it's still Terrafire Ogerpon, even after an Intimidate. There's maybe a chance that Cresselia goes down? I don't really know. What do you think, James?
Yeah, the Cresselia is pretty healthy. It's going to depend on how well it's trained right here. U-turn is going to come out, and Landorus will be able to pivot. Most likely, you want to assume the Arcanine is going to come in to lower the attack power of both the Landorus variant and the Ogerpon. And it's really going to come down to Jacob. Does he go for the attack and get a really big hit off in the Cresselia with the Ivy Cudgel? Could go for a Swords Dance to negate the Intimidate so he can get some momentum, but it's going to be pretty tough for him. But Hornleech instead, doing about 50% to the Arcanine. Not bad damage, but this Ice Beam is not something you really want to take as...
Oh, his Landorus hangs on there. That's a really big deal because Intimidated is such a massive player in this battle. Being able to survive is really, really important to preserve your Landorus. I think if Landorus goes down there, this could be a totally different game. And now things are a little bit tricky, right? You have the option of extreme speeding. You also have the option of going for Rock Slide and potentially doing huge damage to the Ogerpon. I think this is kind of tricky. It feels like this is a turn where prediction is really, really impactful. One advantage, by the way, that Jacob still has is he has an unrevealed 4th Pokemon. It could be that Amoonguss, could be that Specs Fluttermane. That seems kind of likely. Could even be something like the Iron Bundle to come in and deal with the Landorus later. So, yeah, this is an interesting spot.
Yeah, looks like we're going to see Landorus switching in. James is considering Landorus for the Arcanine, maybe just getting another Intimidate, so the Ogerpon going to be at -1 after it got the boost earlier. Landorus, we're going to see from Jacob, is going to retreat here to preserve the Intimidate for later in the game, as Iron Hands is going to come back out. So, going to have fake outs being able to reset is pretty healthy right now, but let's see what's going to happen because it is switching as a second turn, so Landers is actually going to be able to intimidate the Iron Hands as well, so it's really not going to be able to do much right here. As let's see what Ogerpon can really do, but Cresselia shouldn't be able to do too much damage to Ogerpon at the bright side, but a Spiky Shield, passive turn, not able to take damage, but you are letting this Ogerpon just get weaker and weaker with these Intimidate rotations that James just has with the double option with Landis variant and the Hisuian Arcanine.
Yeah, really seeing the power of double Intimidate, because even if Jacob wants to go for a Swords Dance, he's just going to be constantly like having his attack lowered further and further every single turn. So this is an interesting spot here. Like you have Ogerpon at -1 attack now, so you do have the option, of course, of going for a Swords Dance, but with the Intimidate kind of coming in and out, I almost wonder if it's even worth it. As we actually see something, James considering an interesting play here, stomping Tantrum into the Ogerpon and potentially switching out is something he's considering here. I guess it makes some sense because Cresselia is not like really contributing that much, but I don't know, it still feels a little bit risky to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, this is going to be pretty interesting. I guess like Cresselia's in a pretty safe spot, but looks like he just wants to get the Arcanine in. We're going to see the Ogerpon actually switch out and reveal the Amoonguss as the last Pokemon, so going to be able to sponge up some attacks right here. The Cresselia is going to retreat and go out into the Arcanine, so now the Iron Hands is going to be locked in at -2 from the double Intimidate that we've seen, so it's not really going to be able to do much damage here. Let's see if we do see a Fake Out or maybe a Drain Punch.
Oh, a switch. Amazing switch here. That was a really, really smart switch. As Landorus now comes back in risky, because if Landorus goes down on this turn, I think things can get kind of dire for Jacob early here. But with this positioning now, Arcanine is very threatened by the Stomping Tantrum. Stomping Tantrum doesn't even do very much to Amoonguss, and there's no way for James to switch and Intimidate because both Intimidators are currently on the field.
Yeah, so let's see. Jacob can... It's kind of a similar situation. We had the Arcanine have the ability to go for Extreme Speed in the Landorus. Let's see if it'll commit it this time. Will Jacob hard switch or not? Because if you lose Landorus, as we said before, the game gets pretty dicey with losing the ability to shut down the 3 of the physical attackers that James has brought. So, but the thing is, we've seen healers on both sides, so there is Pollen Puff option from the Amoonguss. But Amoonguss can also go for Spore. It's a pretty interesting scenario, whether Spore, Pollen Puff Wars, but really it's just a passive play, trying to figure out when to actually get like some kind of setup going.
Yeah, interesting. James is making a middle ground play here. He goes for Extreme Speed into the Landorus, hoping to pick it up. Gets a critical hit, actually. It's going to be a big deal. Going to be a really big deal. However, Jacob's not out of this yet, but Stomping Tantrum to cover in case either of the back Pokemon do switch in here. But the Amoonguss has been left completely unbothered here. I guess James is okay letting a Pokemon fall asleep because of the Cresselia's Lunar Blessing in the back, but to me this still feels a little risky because the Swords Dance Ogerpon can come in, and with both Intimidators on the field, you've got to be at least a little bit worried that this thing's going to start, I don't know, like killing all your Pokemon, right? As Ogerpon does come back in.
Yeah, and then Body Aspect will get activated every time it switches in, so it gets +1, so automatic +1. You have Stomping Tantrum threatening the Ogerpon, but doesn't pick up the knockout. It could just be a Rage Powder Swords Dance right here. James can switch, but the thing is, if you're switching, there's just no damage you're getting onto the opponent's side. You're able to get a Swords Dance. So even though Jacob has gone down with his first Pokemon, it's still a pretty decent spot for him, as he's pretty much in a great position to set up for a Swords Dance here, and that is where you need, because you can get a lot of momentum. Like, it doesn't matter if James can heal if his Pokemon are just going down, because the Ogerpon is at +3 currently.
Absolutely, and even double Intimidate is not going to save you that much there, especially with the sleeping Arcanine. We do see a switch considered here, double switch out here. I think this team is this turn is really impactful personally. I think that if James is able to get his Cresselia in without his Iron Hands falling asleep, this could potentially be turned around. But if Iron Hands gets put to sleep here, it could be bad. Basically, what James is saying here is, okay, you probably know I want to switch both my Pokemon out here, so I'm going to make the I'm going to switch to the less obvious slots where normally you'd bring Safety Goggles Cresselia in to take the Spore, but it actually is a Rage Powder here. This implies, I think, Swords Dance personally. It is just Ivy Cudgel, though. Interesting. Jacob choosing to play with a little bit of restraint here into the Iron Hand slot. I do think that is the... well, that is not great for James. However, it's not so bad either, I think. I think Iron Hands was probably your least important member at this point because the Landorus has such little HP in the back. Once you deal with... Oh, actually... Wait, I think it's fine. Oh, actually, I think James is close to a guaranteed game here because of Terra Flying, Terra Blast, right? You could Terra Blast the Amoonguss who can't protect her Terra, go for a Trick Room, then Lunar Blessing to wake up the Arcanine, and just Rock Slide to win the game. I think like Rock Slide Psychic, or Lunar Blessing Rock Slide to win the game. I think that's actually, unless you miss Rock Slide, very, very safe. But maybe James doesn't want to commit the Terra here, or maybe he's thinking about things differently. You do have some advantage here with the fact that you do have this Cresselia and the Intimidate down on the Ogre Pawn. So, yeah, we'll have to see how James kind of maneuvers through this, because I think he should be actually in a decent position here, but this Ogre Pawn is just so scary.
Yeah, the Ogre Pawn is definitely threatening a lot of damage. It also is going to be pretty interesting because James has not used his Terra yet, but he does have the Terra Fire, so he's able to resist both the Ivy Cudgel and the Horn Leech right here. But we are going to see him go for that committal Terra Fire as a defensive play right here. And it does make sense. The only thing that can really hit super effectively is going to be the Rock Slide from the Landis variant on Jacob's side, which shouldn't do too much damage right here. So pretty good defensive play overall. Let's see what happens. Rage Powder is going to come out from Jacob to redirect anything because you don't want to risk the Ogre Pawn. It is your win condition. U-turn is going to come out into the Amoonguss right here, and Arcanine is going to come in. So you did get some Intimidates down onto this Ogre Pawn. It is now at -1 after the Arcanine comes in, so won't be able to do too much damage. But let us see what is going to come out. Does Jacob maybe potentially go for a read, or does he just go for a Sword Stance here?
Yeah, I think kind of both. You really want to go for Sword Stance. I think it is just Ivy Cudgel, unfortunately. Yeah, I think that this is kind of a good play from James. Being able to bring Arcanine in and remove the sleep thanks to the power of Lunar Blessing is really big. And now you can see James as he starts to dance again. Rock Slide's just in such a strong position with the HP so low on Landorus. And I think something that's kind of interesting about Ogre Pawn is that it's really strong, obviously, but when it Terras, it's really strongest when it's using Ivy Cudgel, because it's not, if it uses Horn Leech, it's still a powerful move, it's still a powerful Pokemon, but it's not getting that kind of additional boost to the fire type moves when it uses Horn Leech. And so basically, even though Arcanine is like still able to be hit by Horn Leech for neutral damage, it's just not such a big deal in my opinion to have it kind of to have that be a thing here. Sorry, I'm kind of tripping over my words here as I see. I find the way that James is navigating through this endgame really interesting. He doesn't want to risk Rock Slide. Yeah, I think it's very interesting personally. Like it's probably not the way that I would have approached this, but it's obviously working. Amoonguss does switch out here. I guess it makes sense because if you miss Rock Slide, you're just in really big trouble here. So I think I see the vision.
Yeah, maybe trying to use his Landers for an Intimidate so the Ogre Pawn can survive the Choice Band Rock Slide and maybe get a Sword Stance up and then heal back with Horn Leech later. But actually just going straight for the Horn Leech. Not able to do much because of those Intimidates. Doesn't have a high crit ratio, thankfully. But Flare Blitz going to knock out the Landers right here. So that Arcanine is going to be locked into Flare Blitz for the game. So Ogre Pawn might have chances to go for Sword Stance. But that Amoonguss cannot go for a Protect because it doesn't have it. Psychic is going to be fired off into Ogre Pawn and do some decent chip damage. But right now, the Amoonguss is pretty threatened right now. And unless you're going to crit the Arcanine with Horn Leech, I don't really see a way out of this.
Well, it's actually ambiguous. I think that another Horn Leech might actually KO. It's going to be really close, but this is such an interesting direction. I feel like the switch to Landorus, go for Trick Room, and then just like, I mean, the Amoonguss, it has, it doesn't have a way to hit the Arcanine. I feel like that's a really safe way to win this game. Yeah, Trick Room and then start Lunar Blessing, because you have the safety goggles, exactly. So it's just interesting to see the way that James is maneuvering this. He really doesn't want to set Trick Room up, which I just think is really interesting here. As he's going for Psychic actually into Amoonguss, he doesn't want to set Trick Room up. I think this is so interesting. It's such a different approach than I would have taken to this game, because I feel like Arcanine and Trick Room next to Lunar Blessing Cresselia just feels so good, but yeah, James is playing it a different way, and I mean, it's working for him so far. Let's see how he does this. How much do you think Psychic does to Amoonguss? I feel like it's going to do less than we expect.
Since most Amoongusses run physically defensive, but I'm pretty sure the Cresselia is not offensive on this team, it should do a decent amount. I'd say at least 40%. It might be a 2KO from this range, but it'd be pretty tough to say. But Landers does switch into Horn Leech. Psychic going to come out from that Cresselia. It should probably be a 2KO. Nice. It looks really close, but it should be able to. But that Citrus Berry will change the game right here.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing here is that Amoonguss did not go for a defensive play. It actually went for a Pollen Puff. So, he's getting a little bit of healing here. I think Spore might have been a better. I mean, it was benefit of hindsight, obviously. Since you were locked into Flare Blitz there, I don't think it's such a big deal. It looks like James wants to use it in the end game. He really wants to use Landorus to beat this Ogre Pawn. It looks like is the way that he's playing this as he tries to preserve Landorus here. Yeah, I think if you're Jacob, you have to make a tough call as to how you want to close out this end game. I think that like Amoonguss without Protect is just kind of vulnerable, it feels like. I think at some point Jacob needs to go for a Swords Dance to actually be threatening here. As U-turn takes Amoonguss down to below 50%, that might be a range of a Psychic. What do you think, James?
Yeah, that's going to be really close. I think Rage Powder might not have been the option, although maybe worried about the Stomping Tantrum, but might have had to commit there. Maybe went for a Spore and Arcanine, maybe buy him some time to actually go for a Swords Dance, because this Ogerpon, as we've seen how strong this throughout this entire match, the double Intimidate is just negating it. So even with the Swords Dance, the Ogerpon's been intimidated multiple times. So I kind of already lost track on how many Intimidates have been fired off at this point. But yeah, Amoonguss is able to survive. Could have got a Spore, but instead, because of that Rage Powder, now you're just super threatened by Amoonguss just going down this turn, and Ogerpon will be fighting the Scarflanders and then always threatened by the Stomping Tantrum.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I did just get a look here, and this isn't over for Jacob because it looks like James is running out of your time. Maybe I missaw though. It was so quick. James selected really quickly this turn, so it's hard to tell. But yeah, I feel like even after that Swords Dance, I mean, the Ogerpon isn't positive. It might be at neutral. I think it might even be at -1. So I mean, really well played by James, honestly. Like, I think getting rid of the Iron Hands early was good. Getting the damage on the for me, the big term was the prediction of the Landorus. Of course, this game isn't over yet, but Extreme Speed does so much damage. Oh my goodness. As Hornleech is going to take out the Arcanine here, that is good. But Cresselia finishing off Amoonguss means it's going to be pretty difficult for Ogerpon to 1v2 the Landorus and Cresselia. Kind of ironically, if it weren't a Grass type here, it would have a decent chance if it could get another Swords Dance up, maybe, just because it could. If it can take out the Landorus, then it can actually probably beat the Cresselia with Hornleech once it gets to enough attack boost. But here, I think you're basically looking at. I mean, actually, I don't think there's anything you could do like if James locks into Stomping Tantrum.
Yeah, you can't even go for like multiple Spiky Shields for Stomping Tantrum just because Lunar Blessing can just heal the Landorus. So
you can we see like 7 Spiky Shields in a row, and then it's 48 seconds. He's still got plenty of time. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Spiky Shield number 1. Okay, here's the plan. Spiky Shield, you somehow live the Stomping Tantrum. Hang on, wait, no, okay. Spiky Shield 118 down to. Let's see here. Maybe there's a way to do this. 92? Nope, it's not happening. Okay. Okay, well then I think this game is pretty much wrapped up here. The question to me is how is Jacob going to adapt in Game 2? Because to me it feels like Ogerpon was the Terra, and it didn't really do enough. Like it wasn't bad by any means. Like, I mean, it got a pretty crucial crit to KO the Iron Hands in one hit, but it wasn't enough to win the game, and like I feel like this whole team was kind of built around the Ogerpon here. Also, bringing three physical attackers and Amoonguss into a double Intimidate team was another thing that I think Jacob might want to reconsider. But yeah, I think the real thing is that Jacob never went for a Swords Dance here, so he was able to be slowed down. I would have loved to see him, prior to taking a knockout on one of the Intimidate Pokemon or disrupting them more in some way, and using that to allow Ogerpon to kind of actually be a threat, because it didn't really feel like it did that much in that game.
Yeah, I feel like if you ended up going for Swords Dance on the turn, you ended up critting and KOing the Iron Hands, you would have actually been in a really good spot. You could have maybe even got a second Swords Dance up, and then those Intimidates really wouldn't have mattered. But instead of going for the KO, and the problem is you got the KO, but that gave James a lot of momentum because he was able to just keep pivoting his double Intimidate back and forth, and there wasn't really much you could do to stop that. So yeah, maybe something to consider. Another thing that would have been really interesting to see is that Iron Bundle, because we saw the Landorus and we saw the Hisuian Arcanine.
And the Terrafire Cresselia.
Yeah, they're all Pokemon that Iron Bundle can do extremely well against. Granted, there was the Iron Hands, and the Cresselia does have the option to Trick Room, so it can be a little bit complicated in this matchup. So something you're going to have to consider, but I don't think you can just brute force this with just like Swords Dance. Ogerpon, unless you're really able to find a spot, he was able to, but I don't think he was able to Swords Dance. Yep, a bit too late. So he really needs to find a way to break through this double Intimidate core if he wants to try to set up for that Swords Dance Ogerpon, or he has to at least bring his special attackers, either Flutter Mane or Iron Bundle here.
Yeah, I think to me the real mark of that game was the fact that both these players were kind of playing a very switch-heavy style, where they had Iron Hands and they had Landorus, and they had a Pokemon that could offer healing as well. And so they were just switching in and out, getting Intimidate down over and over again. And to me, kind of the difference between James and Jacob in that match was the fact that James was able to hit the Landorus with an Ice Beam prediction. He actually hit it on the switch-in and took it out in one hit, and I think that was a pretty big deal personally, because then Landorus was kind of, James was the only Intimidator that was out of commission pretty early on, as we do see Game 2 here, and this is an adjustment from Jacob, and it is going to be the Iron Bundle up front here. So I like that adjustment a lot. What do you think, James? Yeah, James. You're both James. I was like, wait.
So both of these players might know that if the Iron Hands is a speed tire or not, but we did see Jacob's moves before first, so he does have the option to go for a Fake Out and then like maybe go for a Hydro Pump into that Hisuian Arcanine. Of course, Hisuian Arcanine has the option to go for Terra if it wants to, but we're going to see the switch out this time around. But I do really like the Iron Bundle adjustment. It is able to put on a lot more pressure to the double Intimidate mons. Now the question is, are you able to get rid of the Iron Hands and maybe the Cresselia, which might be a bit problematic for these two, as Trickum's going to be a bit problematic, but let's see what he has in the back maybe.
Absolutely. We do see Arcanine switching into Cresselia here. This is kind of, with Iron Hands on the field, this is the only safe switch into Iron Bundle. I think I would have been interested to see Iron Bundle in the back here, actually, as we actually see a Protect from Iron Bundle, so I'm a little surprised to see that. It's not going to be bad this turn. As Heavy Slam happens into the Cresselia, to make 30 damage, but Cresselia is very tanky, very, very tanky, as Wild Charge goes into the Iron Bundle, and I think Iron Bundle is going to be forced pretty immediately off of the field as Wild Charge is coming out here. And actually, you can go for Trick Room. You could actually just go for Ice Beam as well if you want into the Iron Bundle. I think the Landorus switch in is kind of obvious here, assuming that Jacob has both Landorus and Ogerpon in the back, so yeah, it's a little bit tricky. Iron Bundle really needs to be hitting things for super effective or things that are frail to be doing a lot of work, and here it's not hitting either. So, yeah, I think Iron Bundle in the lead here. James has found a really good way of neutralizing it, but we know that if Jacob can just preserve Iron Bundle, it's so strong against the Pokemon in the back. So we'll have to see how he adjusts here as Iron Bundle does switch out.
Yeah, we're going to see the Iron Bundle switch out into the Amoonguss, which is able to take the Iron Hands attack. It won't be able to eat this Psychic well, but it's actually a double switch coming out. So Iron Hands is also going to retreat. We're actually going to see all four of Jacob's Pokemon.
Oh, he actually
Ogerpon.
left Landorus behind. I'm very surprised to see that.
Yeah, going to be able to... I mean, the Psychic's going to come out of Amoonguss. It's going to do a pretty big amount to the Amoonguss. Not even going to be able to activate the Citrus Berry, but will this Wall Charge be able to? It looks like yes, it will be. So, looks like Amoonguss can definitely live another double up, it looks like, unless it's Heavy Slam Psychic. It was a pretty interesting turn one where we saw the Heavy Slam into the Cresselia, but most likely I think Jacob was trying to bait the Terra and go for Heavy Slam to get the damage into the Fairy-type Hisuian Arcanine. So, yeah, ended up getting the redraw, and Cresselia was able to come in for free. And now you're just ending up losing a lot of momentum, as it's not like too bad. This is time for Ogerpon to potentially get a Swords Dance up, and you do have Iron Bundle, which is pretty fast. The problem is you did lose your Speed Booster energy, so if James does have that Scarf Landorus in the back like we saw before, it will be able to outspeed the Iron Bundle without this booster energy, so that is going to be a pretty big factor.
Absolutely. As actually we do see the Swords Dance here. I agree a lot with this play. I think that if you're Jacob, you need, like you saw what happened last game, you need to start putting on pressure with this Ogerpon. You're a Psychic into the Amoonguss. This is going to do a lot. I think that's Heavy Slam range, and I believe that's what James selected here. I think that makes sense, taking out Amoonguss right away. You really, like, I actually don't think that James's team is that good into Amoonguss, especially once Cresselia goes down. Yeah, but taking out Amoonguss here actually isn't the worst thing in the world, because it means that Iron Hands is able to come in right away and start putting on a lot of pressure with Fake Out and an attack from Ogerpon, and James can only Terra one of his Pokemon to survive. And even like switching in both Intimidators, you're at risk of taking Ivy Cudgel on the Landorus, and I'm pretty sure after a Terra that will just take it out. As it's actually bundle switching in here. Oh, this is actually really interesting. This allows Jacob to go for Hydro Pump into the Cresselia to cover for the Terra Fire.
Yeah, you can cover for a lot of potential Terras. The Iron Hands' Terra Water could be covered with like a Freeze Dry plus the Ivy Cudgel. We could see like the Arcanine swap. He could go for a Hydro Pump instead. So the Iron Bundle puts on a lot more offensive pressure against potential switches, but let's see if James is even going to consider any, because right now it seems pretty safe for at least the Cresselia should be okay for now, unless specifically a double up, but then you leave Iron Hands open to potentially KO your Iron Bundle. So you really need Iron Bundle, I think, in order to make sure that the Landorus is checked if James did bring it. So
absolutely,
very tough position, I think, if you're Jacob.
Yeah, I think that getting this turn right, though, could win the game if you are Jacob. So we do see a Terra coming out. This is actually could be either Pokemon. This could be Terra Fire Ogerpon. It could be Terra Ghost Iron Bundle as well. We'll have to see here. It is going to be the Terra Fire Ogerpon, so I agree with that play. Personally, I think this is interesting. You know, I actually wouldn't have minded going after the Iron Hands here, because if you take out Iron Hands, and Cresselia goes for Trick Room, you can always bring into your own Iron Hands and go from there. As Hydro Pump actually into the bundle. Interesting Hydro Pump here, because that is Terra Water on the Iron Hands, and Hornleech is going to cover for the Terra there. Great play from Jacob. It would have been, I don't think that +3 Hornleech KOs
without the Terra.
Without the Terra. I don't think +3 Hornleech KOs without the Hydro Pump. So that was actually a little bit risky. I think I would have preferred to see a Freeze Dry, but not going for the Trick Room here, and yeah, it's a little bit, that's also a little risky, as James brings in the Landorus. Now, with the Terra Fire, you are actually, unfortunately, well, you're in danger of Stomping Tantrum. I don't know if Stomping Tantrum will get the one-shot, but of course the Protect plus Freeze Dry is also really obvious. if you're Jacob here, do you call the Landorus U-turn? Do you or how do you want to proceed here? What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting options. You could go for a Hydro Pump if you expect a U-turn because it covers the Landorus if no Terra is involved, or it covers the Arcanine. You could go for the Freeze Dry into the Landorus if you don't want to miss it and you expect a Terra right here. There's a lot of potential options. Rock Slide probably misses the KO on Iron Bundle if it's a decently bulky one, so can be a bit complicated because you still have Fake Out from Iron Hands, but we're going to see Spiky Shield instead, so we're going to be relying a lot on the bundle right here for pressuring the lands, but
yeah, nice Spiky Shield. I think I would have attempted this attack there, but Jacob doesn't take the bait here as Landorus takes a little bit of chip damage from the Spiky Shield. Probably doesn't matter as Freeze Dry comes out, not risking a miss here, hits the Landorus, picks it up, the one-hit KO on the Landorus, but we did see that James went for Trick Room here, so now this is not by any means over, or like really by any means. It's actually pretty close, especially because James has actually preserved his Terra. So this Cresselia is still putting on a lot of pressure, as is this Choice Band Rock Slide Arcanine.
yeah, so the only problem is you do have to lock in a Rock Slide. There is an Iron Hands in the back, which I believe was relatively healthy. So even if you read that and go for a Rock Slide Psychic, most likely in an Ogre Pond, because you're probably reading the bundle to protect and Iron Hands to switch in. So you can go for like Fake Out Hydro Pump the next turn. It's still going to be a pretty dicey endgame, but we are going to see the Ogre Pond retreat into Iron Hands, and most likely, I'd assume, a Protect from Iron Bundle.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The Fake Out plus Hydro Pump play is really threatening here, especially because the Iron Hands, or the Arcanine is Terra Fairy, which means it doesn't resist water when it Terras, but James is making this call correct. He goes for a Psychic to the Iron Hands, although I feel like in game 1 we saw this, it did like 25%. Same as it did this time. Yeah, about that. No special defense drop. Special defense drop would actually be pretty impactful here, I think. As we are now in Trick Room, and actually, it's kind of funny when you set up Trick Room and then your opponent ends up with the slowest Pokemon on the field. So yeah, really nice job of Jacob to preserve the Iron Hands here, keeping it healthy, keeping it alive, and now having it be a really great tool against this late game Cresselia Trick Room.
Yeah, now James is probably going to be forced to go for that Terra Arcanine because Fake Out Hydro Pump. You could go for Hydro Pump Miss if you really, really want to. And
That's so risky.
He might actually have to still because the Hydro Pump will probably put you into range of Heavy Slam. The Iron Hands most likely underspeeds the Cresselia and can get the Heavy Slam off before like Iron Hands gets distracted by 2 Psychics. So it would depend on the speed tier, but really, this is going to be a really dicey spot regardless. Should be a close one though for this game too.
Yeah, I think that this is definitely a photo finish here as we do see the Terra come out from James' Arcanine. I think the other thing here is that by terrestrializing Teferi, you are now completely vulnerable to Ogre Pond. I think Ogre Pond might be able to just clean up this game on its own, assuming Terra Fire, assuming enough chip on the Arcanine has happened that you that you can actually KO with Terra Fire or Ivy Cudgel. We do see the Fake Out here. This is a very safe play. There's no reason. Actually, does a ton of damage thanks to a critical hit here. Psychic from Cresselia. This is good. Cresselia is your only way of getting rid of Iron Hands, right? And it's actually doing a great job at that. No special defense drop, as we are going to see a Hydro Pump here, and it does connect. Jacob doing a great job hitting his Hydro Pumps. Without the Assault Vest, you can see that brings Arcanine so low that, yeah, it's going to really need Cresselia to underspeed the Iron Hands here, I think, in order to pull this one off.
Oh, and what's interesting, yep, Iron Hands is going to underspeed Cresselia, but James Antari gets the KO onto the Arcanine, and I think we're going to be getting a Game 3 here, most likely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to imagine Cresselia beating this Ogre Pond. I mean, a single Swords Dance into Ivy Cudgel will end the game, and I don't think Psychic's going to do enough damage to put it in Danger Zone, as we do see Psychic doing a fair bit to the Iron Bundle. There's the special defense drop. If that had happened on the first Psychic, we might have had a different scenario, maybe? Probably not. Freeze Dry hitting the Cresselia. No freeze there, though, as James is just going to give up the battle here, understanding that he's actually not going to give up the battle, actually. That was a stupid thing to say, Wolf. Yeah, I mean, you may as well take the time to think, right? Like, think about what you want to do in Game 3 here as Wild Charge is going to come out. I think that Iron Hands might go down at the end of this turn. I think it'll survive. As Psychic comes out from Cresselia into Iron Hands. Going to live this one with about 30% here. Yeah, maybe a little more, 5%. Freeze Dry hitting the Cresselia here. But yeah, I think the question, James, is how would you adjust if you're James, and would you make any adjustment if you're Jacob?
Yeah, it's pretty tough, I think. You did actually probably have all the tools that you had. I think the only problem was, I think you could probably actually bring the same thing. It's just you have to respect more of, like, the Ogre Pond. Like we saw before. Like, this time, Jacob, when he had the Ogre Pond next to Mungus, he had it in Game 1, he didn't set up a Swords Dance, he instead went for the immediate damage, got the KO on the Iron Hands. This time he was able to set up a Swords Dance. James kind of just let that happen, didn't even switch into any of his Intimidate mons. Nothing pressured the Ogre Pond immediately, and then the Ogre Pond was just able to pressure so much right there, especially next to Iron Bundle, because he was able to get really good pin KOs into like everything on James' team. So something you're really going to have to watch out for if you're James. I think you could probably adjust if you really want to. Like, you could even go with maybe a more offensive option, like We could even see the Gastrodon if we really want to, because this Gastrodon with Terra Fairy, it's not Terra Fire, so it's not going to be amazing in Ogerpon, but might help out a bit against a bundle, so your Arcanine might be a bit safer against it, which would be a pretty big thing, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. I think for me, kind of the big turn in that game was the turn where it was Amoonguss and Ogerpon against Cresselia and I think Iron Hands, and basically what James does is he goes for Psychic and Heavy Slam to KO the Amoonguss. I really would have loved to see a switch to Arcanine and Trick Room there, I think, because I think you want to make sure that the Ogerpon isn't being as threatening, and with Lunar Blessing and potentially a defensive Terra on the Arcanine there, I think you can actually threaten quite a bit, especially because Jacob did not bring the Landorus that game, which meant there was no way to slow down those rock slides. So I think you've seen all 4 Pokemon at that point, you've definitely seen all 4 Pokemon at that point. You know that like Amoonguss and Iron Hands can be dealt with in Trick Room with like Cresselia's Lunar Blessing slowing them down and your own Iron Hands, and just using Arcanine's rock slide to just put on a ton of pressure is I think what I would have liked to see there. So yeah, I think I agree. I think that really the big thing there was the Ogerpon and the fact that Jacob, unlike Game 1 where he just got intimidated over and over and over again, he this time was allowed to set up a Swords Dance and use that to take a singular KO, which then kind of snowballed into him winning the game. So I think that I agree. I think you can bring the same Pokemon if you're James. Is there anything that, you mentioned, I don't think Urshifu should be coming, right? It doesn't really do anything here.
Yeah, like you could technically bring it because you don't have to worry about Spiky Shield breaking your Sash, and you could do a lot of damage to Ogerpon. You might actually KO it with like a Terra Dark Wicked Blow, but might be more comfortable just to stick with what you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do see a different lead here again. Actually, this time from James. Jacob sticking with the same lead from Game 2, and James going with a different lead in Game 3. I think this makes some sense. You're probably anticipating something similar from Jacob in Game 3 here, and so leading with the 2 Pokemon that are best against Iron Bundle, I think, is a pretty reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, this is going to be pretty tough for Iron Bundle as it's already threatened. Iron Hands is actually not able to do that much against opposing Iron Hands and Cresselia for Jacob, so a little bit of a tough situation. Going to decide to retreat here because you don't want to lose your Iron Bundle. We saw how valuable it was in the second game. Amoonguss is going to come in, and that makes sense. You don't want to risk Ogerpon either on a potential Psychic Wall Charge double up. Fake Out going to come out on Cresselia just to make sure that the Amoonguss is not taking that much damage on the switch-in, while you're getting some Drain Punch chip with James's Iron Hands.
Actually, there's a fair bit of damage with the Drain Punch. You can't be that upset about that. But yeah, this is, I think, actually a pretty nice position for Jacob here. I like this positioning a lot. I think that Amoonguss, like, with Amoonguss in the field, you basically encourage Cresselia to go for Cresselia to go for a Trick Room, as actually we do see Iron Hands switching into Ogerpon here. James did double that slot, but I don't know. I think it's actually not so bad that Ogerpon comes in here. So do you see a Psychic? Let's do a little over a quarter, maybe 30%? About a quarter?
Oh, that's a
really big special defense drop. That actually is a... Oh my god, is that a crit, or is Iron Hands just super strong?
No, it is just that strong.
Wow.
You do get the Spore off, but... I mean, this is kind of a weird spot. I guess like Ogerpon could have maybe went for a Hornleash to recover to get out of Psychic range, and then you could Pollen Puff your Ogerpon. But it's kind of a weird, complicated spot where now Psychic will definitely KO Ogerpon even if you Hornleash. So the Ogerpon, your win condition, kind of weak right here, and it's really hard to get a potential Pollen Puff in that Ogerpon because Cresselia is just going to outspeed the Amoonguss. So really tough position for Jacob, but nice double up from James.
Yeah, really nice play from James. I think that was potentially a game-winning play because you're so far ahead now. If you look at Jacob's team, the only Pokemon he has to deal with is Cresselia at all, like even a little bit, is this Ogerpon. So the fact that not only is it super low HP and now intimidated, it also can't really do much, and special defense drop as well. As Amoonguss can't redirect the Psychic here, so Rage Powder coming out here, but it's not going to do anything into Cresselia. As Swords Dance, this is an extremely risky play from the Ogerpon, going for a Swords Dance, trying to regain some momentum here, but Psychic is not going to be affected by the Rage Powder thanks to Cresselia's safety goggles. Going to hit the Ogerpon, take it out, and I mean, I don't want to call it too soon. There's only one KO, but from where I'm sitting, I think that probably wins James the game. I think it's almost impossible to deal with this or to deal with Cresselia now that you've lost your only real way of hitting it in the Ogerpon.
Yeah, this is just like chess, and you blundered your queen immediately. This is not looking good for Jacob because a lot of his offensive pressure, as we've seen throughout this game, was that Ogerpon because that's what allowed him to get knockouts. But right now, Iron Bundle is able to do some pretty good damage to Arcanine and Landorus, but when the Iron Hands and then you have the safety goggles Cresselia annoying this Amoonguss, it's just going to be really tough to actually even break through this Cresselia. Yeah,
Cresselia is such a tanky Pokemon, a Pokemon capable of winning games on its own. As Jacob does remove Amoonguss here, goes into the goes into the Iron Hands here. Might be worried about a potential Terra Blast from James. James had the ability to step on the gas there. I think if you're Jacob, you're basically counting on James misplaying here, but James is, you know, an international champion, a former world champion in the senior division. Like, he's not someone who's likely to give you many opportunities where he makes mistakes, because he does bring in Iron Hands here. Actually, it's kind of funny to end up in a position where, like, you have the fake-out dynamics of Iron Hands, but it's not on turn one. Like, again, the fact that James's Iron Hands is faster is very relevant here, and something else I want to call out here is not only the fact that Iron Bundle is going to really struggle to hit these Pokemon for any damage, but the fact that there's no protect on any of these Pokemon, it feels like. Like, you're kind of just in a position, or like on both Iron Hands and Amoonguss, so that Fake Out plus Psychic into the Iron Hands is very, very safe here, as James doesn't want to go for that. He's instead going for damage on the Iron Bundle. Hydro Pump coming out. We are going to see a miss here. That was into the Iron Hands. To be honest, not super impactful. The Assault with Iron Hands is so tanky. Psychic here, a pretty big deal, though, because it does do damage onto this Iron Bundle, putting in range of a Drain Punch as well.
Yeah, maybe hoping for 2 Hydro Pumps plus a Drain Punch being able to KO the Iron Hands, but Lunar Blessing would have probably healed it back up. I think maybe like one of your win cons was probably hoping for a freeze at this point on the Cresselia.
Yeah, I had the exact same thought. Freeze the Cresselia with Freezer, I hope it never thaws, and just win the game like that.
But yeah.
Oh, maybe it is a speed tie. Wasn't James faster earlier?
No, Jacob has been faster at the...
Oh, I'm sorry, then I misspoke. That's my bad. As we do see Iron Bundle go down, and this is gonna, I think this is kind of the writing on the wall, is the expression. There's not really a good way, actually there's no way to deal with Landorus either at this point with Bundle going down.
Yeah, Landorus, Cresselia, there's still an Arcanine in the back. You have Terra, I guess, but like I don't think that's gonna really save you here.
Yeah.
It's just pretty rough.
I think that really like, Jacob kind of just played his Ogerpon really safely in games 1 and 2, and James didn't really make plays to punish it early, and so I think like James kind of lulled Jacob into a false sense of security here. That's my impression, where he's like, oh, like, you don't have to worry about your Ogerpon, you can switch into whatever, like, it's been safe the whole set, and then all of a sudden one turn hitting it with the Psychic and Drain Punch does so much damage that Ogerpon is suddenly in danger. Actually, another interesting play from James here. It's interesting seeing how different players approach the game, as yeah, a critical hit there could have lost the Iron Hands, but I guess it doesn't really matter with Landorus in the back. Like, you're not gonna go down anytime soon.
Yeah, most likely just trying to get enough damage into just a Amoonguss just to clear it, and then have Landorus probably beat the Iron Hands. But realistically, there's probably like a bunch of plays you can make here, and as long as you're just continue to force attack, get damage off, mostly in Amoonguss because Pollen Puff could heal the Iron Hands, you should be pretty much set to win this game.
Absolutely. It's a great thing to point out as well, is that this is something that experienced players do, is when there's like an Amoonguss and something next to it, and you have the option of going after either. Amoonguss is typically the one you want to deal with first, because otherwise Pollen Puff can just negate all of your hard work. We are going to see a Terra here. This Amoonguss maybe is Terra... looking at the wrong
It is Terra Water.
Thank you very much. Terra Water Amoonguss here. So James might be able to, or Jacob might be able to take a KO here, preserve his Amoonguss, and potentially, I don't know, like, actually, yeah, take out the Iron Hands with the Drain Punch. This is definitely a possibility as Drain Punch comes out. Gonna take out James's Iron Hands here, but at this point, the writing's kind of on the wall. Like, yeah, I mean, there's not really an answer to Landorus anymore, as you said.
Yeah, this is pretty tricky. You can even still go out, I think, into Arcanine. I think Arcanine would be pretty fine here.
Yeah,
because you should be able to guarantee the Landers, because now the Iron Hands can't go for the Terra. Actually, I think on this team, it's Terra Fire, actually, so there was no Landers switch, so Stomping Tantrum. But we're just going to see the Landers come in. Maybe you just double up the Amoonguss with Stomping Tantrum Psychic and just call it a wrap.
Yeah, just do it that way, yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, I think hard fought by Jacob here, but yeah, I think really losing the Ogerpon early was a problem. We see the value of Safety Goggles Cresselia. It feels like Amoonguss has kind of been trending downwards, honestly, in this format with so many good grass types. But yeah, I mean, without the Safety Goggles, I think this whole match would have been completely different. So good team building by James as well. We're seeing, yeah, you don't necessarily need to use the old Pokemon to do well. I mean, or the new Pokemon to do well. The old ones are just fine. Having them coming out, there's just a lot of damage.
Yeah, I mean, Landorus, Fairy, and Cresselia, classic VGC Titans, they're still here for a reason. They're still really solid, even through the power creeps.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, great set from both players, really well played by both Jacob and James. Looks like they're doing some kind of handshake hug maneuver there. And yeah, really congratulations to Jacob for making top 8, and congratulations to James, who's moving on to top 4.
Yeah, very solid set from both of them. Great game 3, just a little bit, I think James just was able to read Jacob's lead. Jacob just committed to his game. It's very new.
Switch. I'd like to see in the front Iron Hands slot either of the Cresselia or the Iron Hands. Now you have a Hydro Pump target in the other slot, unless they Terra, in which case then there's benefits to that as well. So Yeah, so yeah, that's one approach. But yeah, we do actually have James here, our winner from the last set. James, how you doing? How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good right now. I'm gonna be real with you. I feel like I kind of played that poorly those first 2 games.
What makes you say that? What do you think you did poorly?
I guess it was more like, I know in game 1 I felt this way. I started panicking like really badly. There's a turn where I think I like lock in Psychic and I like kind of covered my hand, like my hair in my hands.
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was kind of just like an idiot play. It just didn't really work out super well. I was gonna say so I played Jacob in Swiss, and it was a little hard, just namely because I didn't really play the matchup well. I didn't bring Landorus in any of the games that we played in round something or other. I can't remember right now. But
Day 2 Swiss today, yeah.
I was bringing Urshifu, and I was like, oh, Urshifu kind of just pummels this team if I can just spam Wicked Blow. I never got that opportunity. So I was like, okay, well, the first 4 that he brought in game 1, which was Iron Hands, Amoonguss, Landorus, and Ogerpon, that's what he was bringing. And I was like, okay, just bring Intimidate Cycle and never die. And that's kind of what I did. Game 2, he went for a really aggressive double switch, and I didn't really think, I was like, oh, that's really good. But in game 3, I kind of recognized like, oh, that's really like susceptible. And if it won him the first game, he's probably, if it won him the game, he's probably gonna go for it again, just because his lead was a little rough. But if he can bait me into trying to take out parts of that lead and just completely switch it, I just can't do anything. So it's a little tough, but in my mind, I was like, okay, if he's going to lead the same things, I'm just going to go back to Iron Hands and Cresselia, because there's not really anything that can go wrong with that. Like a double up onto any of his Pokemon with Psychic and Drain Punch is pretty tough, and if not, like Drain Punch Ice Beam is really tough for him to deal with. As soon as Bundle leaves the field too, I'm not really that worried anymore. That was like kind of my main goal in game 2 and 3 was like get Bundle off the field, because I was expecting him to bring the Bundle all 3 games. But in my mind, I was like, okay, he didn't bring it game 1, he's probably going to bring it game 2. He brings it game 2, I'm like, okay, I need to get this thing off the field, because as soon as it is, like I said, Lando and Arcanine become a lot safer, especially Landorus. It doesn't have to worry about Bundle just outrunning it completely. And the fact that he led it both games made it super easy for me to kind of capitalize on that by leading something super aggressive into Bundle, where it's like, it can't hit Hands and Cresselia that hard. It doesn't want to take Psychic or Drain Punch. And if it wants to dodge any of that, it's going to have to Terra to Ghost and hope to God that I Drain Punch into it. It's like bulky enough to survive a Psychic, 2 Psychics, but eventually it's going to be whittled down into either E-Speed range or something like that. So I just tried to capitalize on that a lot. And then, like I said, with the switching, it was very like open, and I was like, okay, this game, he really thinks I'm going to go for this Bundle. There's not really a reason to if I can just get it off the field with the Mind Game. So just keep doubling the hands, because the hands and the Amoonguss switching in and out was getting really annoying really fast. And luckily, it happened to switch into Ogerpon, and I just kind of smacked it in the face, and I didn't have to worry about the rest of the game, I felt like, for the most part, as soon as Ogerpon dropped.
Yeah, absolutely. We identified that as well. It felt like as soon as Ogerpon went down, the Cresselia couldn't be beat at all. So yeah, that was definitely a smart play there. I was really curious about you. You seemed really hesitant, especially in game 1, to kind of pull the trigger on Trick Room, especially against even the Amoonguss. I thought that there were a couple opportunities where I was kind of expecting Trick Room and you to position Hisui and Arcanine in early with threatening Rock Slide on the Ogerpon and the low HP Landorus at one point in game 2, and I was just a little surprised to see you. It seems like Trick Room is not something you go for very often. Is that accurate, or what's kind of the deal with Trick Room on Cresselia?
So for a while, Crest was kind of like the underdog of the team. I've come to realize very much that Cresselia is a very broken Pokemon. I think it's more broken than it was in Regulation D. Just because of the Pokemon kind of running around, there's less threats that it has to deal with organically off the bat, and it can afford to run a better Terra, I think. Especially with Psychic and Ice Beam, it's very offensive. The team is not very dedicated to Trick Room, and it's not something I go for super often, although this weekend I have been using it a lot, namely just because things like Urshifu Dark, Arcanine, they're not particularly super fast Pokemon, but they're fast enough.
Yeah, they're in the middle.
So generally what I can do is, I would say I have Iron Hands and Gastron to capitalize on Trick Room, and Iron Hands I would say you really only need Iron Hands and Cresselia to make a Trick Room core, but really like, especially with Dark Urge, it becomes super, super menacing under Trick Room when the opponent is something like very aggressive, like Tailwind, or just a lot of fast Pokemon generally. Chi-Yu and Fluttermane's a really good example where oftentimes you can capitalize on getting Trick Room up, and then Urshifu comes in. Rarely do they have a Pokemon that underruns it besides like Amoonguss, which in that interaction it's a little weird because Amoonguss outruns Ursh, so it spores it or it wants to spore it. But Cresselia also outruns Ursh in Trick Room, so you just Lunar Blessing the spore away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really care. Same thing with Arcanine. So they're like two very middling speed Pokemon, but you can kind of catch a lot of people off guard by going for Trick Room, and then they kind of realize, oh wait, all my Pokemon are like above 200 speed points.
Yeah.
So that this 146 speed Mon can just go all in. And I really do like that. I haven't really touched a team in a long time that has kind of like this really cool like flexibility, like in terms of it gets to run Trick Room and then it gets to be very offensive. I think the last time I actually ran that was my 2018 Worlds team, which kind of had like a good mix of super aggressive builds and then just very defensive Trick Room stuff. I think Trick Room in general is like one of those things where a lot of people kind of want to go hard Trick Room. We saw a lot of Psy Spam and Ursa Luna stuffs at this tournament, but I think Trick Room at its core works best, or like at value. I don't know what to say. At its core works best. Works when you are able to fluctuate it in with a lot of partners that can fluctuate themselves. Like there are always going to be Pokemon like Gigalith, Snorlax, Ursa Luna that are built for Trick Room for the most part, where they want to be in Trick Room. But the truth is, you're never going to always be in Trick Room, so it's not wise to play it like it will always be up, or you should be getting it up. It's better to just kind of play it as a secondary mode for the most part and just kind of see where the game goes. It's not wrong, like it's not bad to game plan around it, but more necessarily, it shouldn't be your only game plan. This should be a line into some things, not so much a giant like web flowchart. We have to get Trick Room up, we have to do this and this and this, and we just kind of have to hope our opponent plays stupid.
Right.
That's kind of the most blunt way to put it.
That makes sense. Did you have anything you wanted to ask, James, or were you good to throw to a break? Oh, sorry, this James. It's confusing.
No, I think we've had a lot. Looks like you're moving on to top 4. I don't know who won the set between Joe and his opponent, but you're facing the winner of that.
I have no idea.
So who would you like to face more? Because your boy Joe, I know you guys are using the same team, so it'd be a mirror. But obviously you're friends, so.
True. Obviously, I'm friends with Brian too, so it's going to be a little heartbreaking no matter what. But I think for the most part, I kind of want to face Joe just because I don't want to face Chi-Yu Fluttermane again. I'm so tired of fighting Chi-Yu and Fluttermane. This is my PSA to everyone out there. Where's the camera? I'm going to look directly at it. Don't use it.
You should use it. That's angel on your shoulder, devil on your shoulder. You should use it, but not if you're playing me. If you're playing everyone else, they'll go for it. I like Chi-Yu Fluttermane. They're strong. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get set up for top 4 here. Congratulations to James.
Thank you.
And to you, James, for casting. And yeah, we'll throw to a break, and we'll be back shortly to bring you some more top 4 action.